Hello, this is Susanna Piaja. I am a student here at Laterno University, and today I will be just going over my literary review paper. Um, Today I'll be discussing the disorder of anorexia nervosa. So we'll just start off with kind of the definition of the disorder, leading into kind of the causes of the disorder, the history of how anorexia nervosa kind of came about, also talking about treatment plans, and then ending with a case study, what you would do for the client who is struggling with anorexia nervosa, and finishing off with a biblical perspective of how we can encourage and interact in a biblical, gospel-centered way for those who are struggling with the disorder as well. So, first off, anorexia nervosa is a very complex, multifaceted eating disorder. Many times it is, defined as someone who is perfectly or purposely restricting their eating. Many times this includes very intense calorie counting and skipping meals. Um, Also, it is continued with an obsession with being thin. And with that obsession, many times the individual has a false perspective of their body and their body image. Um, Roughly about 0.0%, 0.06% of the population struggles with this disorder. Um, and many times it is found in individuals who are in their adolescence and young adulthood. And I truly believe that the reason why this is the demographic that most highly affects people with eating disorders is because of the stage of life they are in. If you look at Erik Erikson's kind of stages of development, this is a stage of development of, identity versus confusion. So when an individual is not confident in who they are and trying to figure out what is their purpose in life, they can start to, have low self-esteem, low um, body image, and so that can also lead to the cause of the eating disorder as well. So many times in the end, the disorder is characterized by an unhealthy perspective surrounding food. And, many times, like I said, they have poor body image, concerns of just, weight and size. So, yeah. And so that kind of leads into what causes an individual to kind of get stuck into the cycle of anorexia nervosa. And there is just a myriad of different causes. Um, Everyone's story and everyone's journey with anorexia nervosa is not the same. So, there are biological factors, there are psychological factors, there are environmental factors, and there are also just environmental factors as well. One thing I just want to touch on is the increase of social media, the increase of just individuals just seeing kind of false realities of, the way people present themselves. A lot of things now you can filter, edit, and, the model industry also um, airbrushes and, changes people to have this false reality of, being super thin, and that is the standard of beauty. And that kind of leads into the history of, anorexia nervosa, but we'll talk about that in a second. So just social media and the pressure to, be perfect, have it all together, definitely leads to the disorder, and one of the causations. Another one is just with that low self-esteem and body dissatisfaction, people looking at themselves in the mirror and feeling they're not reaching that high standard of beauty, causing them to find a coping mechanism to reach that standard of beauty. Um, Also, the family environment and dynamic is a very complicated and can be a very good resource to help an individual struggling with anorexia nervosa as a support system, but also the family environment and family dynamic can be very stressful, leading the individual to reach out to an eating disorder like anorexia nervosa to kind of be able to control something. Many times also the disorder can start off, with just being noticed. If the individual starts losing weight, family members can start complimenting them on how they look, and then they want to continue to receive that praise and compliments. So that's how they can fall down into the, spiral of anorexia nervosa. Lastly, with the family dynamic, it has been studied of how the relationship between a daughter and their mother can actually cause an eating disorder, because if the mother is very controlling, and makes all the choices for the daughter looks for an outlet to control and have kind of that sense of being and a sense of her own person, which is really sad if you think about it. But lastly, as just kind of the causes of an eating disorder, specifically anorexia nervosa, it is a very comorbid disorder, which means that many times people who have anorexia nervosa have other disorders as well. Some of these disorders could be depression. It can also be anxiety. Obsessive compulsive disorder is a very big thing because that has a lot to do with control and being able to control what you eat and what you don't eat. Many times it goes along that line. So all of those meshed together can cause the perfect storm of, developing anorexia nervosa. And then also I'll just touch on, biologically, some people may be more inclined to have an eating disorder. But that can be because of genetics. That can be because of, the timing of puberty, and also their mass body index. So let's go into the view of the history of the eating disorder, specifically anorexia nervosa. So if you look back in history, you'll actually see that food restricting habits have been a while for a long time, but it wasn't necessarily because of developing an eating disorder, but the disorder or the restrictive habits were actually known for religious or a purpose in worship. So this was known as fasting. So many times, in biblical and Greco-Roman time period, this was seen as a way to grow in someone's intimacy with the Lord and to, forget about their physical needs and just let their needs be reliant on the Lord. Then if we fast forward to the Victorian era, this is when the shift started changing from, a kind of act of worship to an actual method of, getting thin and changing one's body. And kind of those more causes, like mentioned before, were started to be integrated. And honestly, if you look at today's culture, that now today, fast forward, 200 years, their shift in culture has given us this image that beauty is defined in thinness. So anorexia nervosa is just kind of a result of our Western culture and our views on what is beautiful, causing people to have low self-image, causing people to, feel like they need to change their body and who they are. So that's kind of the history. It's sad that we put a lot of pressure on young people to be perfect, to not make room for mistakes, and to have these intangible expectations that they feel they need to reach. And this is just kind of comes out in an eating disorder. So if someone is dealing with an eating disorder, what are some of those criteria and ways that they can just know that it is something that they are truly struggling with, and what are some ways that they can find treatment? So, uh, since anorexia nervosa is depriving the individual from the nutrients that they need, it has a ton of physical side effects. Um, Lack of energy, excessive tiredness, muscle fatigue, change in stamina. Their bones begin to start to be weak and start to break down because pretty much the body is going in preservation mode because of the lack of nutrients. Also, those comorbid disorders like we talked about earlier, signs of suicidal ideation, social isolation because they don't want to be seen not eating and be questioned about it. A lot of times, depression gets thrown into the mix, and then for females, their menstrual cycle starts to change as well. So if a person, is purposely restricting meals, or there's also binge purge um, type as well. They are those that they eat, but then they vomit, self-induced vomit to kind of not get the nutrients that they need. So there's those two as well. So kind of for treatment, there's multiple different ways. The disorder best to be treated in a very holistic fashion. So, surrounding the individual with a community to help them in every aspect. So many times it is important to establish a doctor to make sure that they, first off, the most important thing is to regain a healthy weight. Because without a healthy weight, they're endangering their own lives. And unfortunately, anorexia nervosa has taken the lives of many people because of lack of nutrients. So number one is to get the client to back to a healthy weight. Secondly, is to help the clients just identify what are those deeper issues, what are those triggers causing the individual to turn to anorexia nervosa. So those are kind of the treatment plans when the individual has been diagnosed as someone who is struggling with anorexia nervosa. And then just to kind of give you an example of what that would kind of look like, I have prepared a case study kind of scenario, and I'll just share it with you and then kind of walk through what would be the steps to bring this individual to health. So Jeremiah is a 20-year-old student athlete. He attends Stanford University and participates in the swim team. Recently, teammates approached Jeremiah's coach about concerns. His teammates noticed changes in Jeremiah's eating patterns. He rarely joins them in the cafeteria, and if he does join them, he usually only eats salad and barely finishes it. Also, the athletic trainer approached the coach as well as noticing significant weight loss in Jeremiah. He also said that Jeremiah has experienced some loss in muscle mass due to what he suspects of not eating. The coach approaches you, the student counselor, to ask what is your opinion on finding help for Jeremiah. So there's some key factors to kind of note. So males do not typically struggle with anorexia nervosa, but there's a 37% higher chance of an individual struggling with the disorder if they're involved in some kind of sport, specifically swimming, running, and wrestling are the three main ones, which we see Jeremiah is a swimmer. So that's one thing to keep inside the factor. It's also in that kind of age range of 14 to 20, which is that range that the disorder usually takes foot. And he's also at Stanford University, which shows that it is a very prestigious school. So being a student athlete, he has both the pressures of performing well as a student and the pressures of being, a good athlete and a good student all at once. So that's very stressful. And especially if he wants to compete and, make it to that next level, he could start going down this road. And, signs that both his athletic trainer and his peers come to the coach, that's a sign that he might be struggling with it. Once again, not eating, signs of not eating, and showing excessive weight loss. So I think the best thing would be to do for the coach to go up to Jeremiah and approach him and, look. Sometimes when athletes are in this place, they need to adjust their physical exercise um, kind of regimens and kind of take a step back in order for them to be in a step healthy. So I think that would be number one, is just, finding accountability and him eating meals and, get back to that healthy weight before returning to competition. Also, the student life counselor from the school got involved as well and starts, practicing cognitive behavioral therapy with him, because that has been shown to be the most successful kind of therapy with individuals struggling with anorexia nervosa. So that's because it helps kind of set goals. It helps try to change patterns in thinking, and it changes that behavior of, restricting to, getting the nutrients that are needed, and then kind of seeing what are the emotions behind why. So yeah, and then if the disorder is to a point that, he is not eating, there's also Eating Disorders Anonymous that he can join for supplemental counseling and support. And then there's also the school nutritionist that he could see weekly to kind of have a weekly log of what he's eating and how much he's eating to get all of the proper nutrients so he can return to being healthy and successful student athlete. So kind of wrapping things up, it is important to look at how we as Christians, how we as, the light of the world should approach people with eating disorders. And, we're just called in 1 Corinthians 6:19 and 20. It says, "Do you not know that your bodies are the temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you and whom you've received from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. Therefore, honor God with your body." And so it's just important to remember that our bodies are a gift from God. He doesn't want us to see us, not eating, and, and it really comes down to identity, knowing that if we're not satisfied in who we are or what we look like, God just cares so much about us and wants us to truly find our identity and just our satisfaction in Him. So I think we should approach those with the disorder with love and just reminding them of who they are and who their identity is found in. And the disorder, it can be very life altering, and I think it's important to surround them with prayer and then remind them of the verse in John that says, "Who the Son sets free is free indeed." So, the Lord can free those even from the darkest chains, heaviest chains of eating disorders. So, yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to listen. I hope you find this paper to be very informative. And I just pray that if we have those in our life who struggle with an eating disorder, we can be a light and guide them to a healthy and a quick recovery.